What's up, guys and girls of Knife Tube? Okay, so I just want to have a little talk with you guys today. And that's going to involve these three Civivis. When you listen to people that supposedly know and understand knives, or you go read posts from people that know and understand knives, out of these three knives, they would have you believe that 14C is going to be the most high performance steel. Let me rearrange these. Nitro V will be the second best out of these three. And this 9CR18 Movi would be the lowest on the totem pole. And in the case of these knives, let's take the geometry out of the equation, because if we don't, the Thug will easily win. It's much thinner behind the edge than the other two, and it's going to do the longest amount of cutting. But we're not going to look at it that way. We're just going to look at it based on the compositions. You have everyone under the sun saying how 14C is their favorite budget steel, and their second favorite is Nitro V, and how any of the CR steels are not going to be as good. They're, you'll hear people say all the time, like, oh, 10 CR is the minimum that I would consider a serviceable steel. Out of these three knives right here, and I have not tested them yet, but my assumption would be, now again, taking geometry out of the equation, from just use and spending time with the knives, I would say that the 9CR has the longest edge retention out of these three. Yes, the 14C and Nitro V is going to be tougher. In knives like this, I don't really need that impact resistance. I'm not going to be hammering it through steel staples or, cutting hurricane straps with it. So that's irrelevant to me. It's a pocket knife. It's going to do pocket knife things. And in that case, edge retention is what is most important to me. All three of these steels are more than capable of being run at 13, 14, 15 degrees per side and holding up to it for your typical cutting. They will handle it no issue whatsoever. Now the Elementum up top and the Paraxis at the bottom, I'm going to cut test these two, because the geometries, yeah, one's a hollow and one's a flat grind, but the behind the edge thickness is almost identical between these two. It wasn't at the start. The Elementum's had a lot of edges on it. It's starting to thicken up a little bit, so now they're both very close. These are both 17 degree edges, or 17 degrees per side edges on these two. And if you look at the bevel, almost identical in size. That's because they're within, in the part that I'll be doing the cut testing with, right in this area, they're less than 1/1000th of an inch difference behind the edge. The Paraxis is at about 15 thousandths, and the Elementum is at about 15.5, 16 thousandths. So, practically the same. You're not going to notice that in cutting. Now, that 1/1000th or so difference, would it make a difference in my kind of testing? No, it will not. It won't even show itself, because if I was going by how much pressure it took to push through the medium, then yes, of course, that slight difference would show itself to some extent. Excuse me. In the testing that I'm doing, no, it's not gonna. So you don't even need to think about that. Both edges are at 17 degrees per side. The 9CR is finished on a Chosera 800. The 14C is finished on a Koromaku 3000. 14C does better at a higher grit, so I went up to 3000 with it. 9CR does... I'm sorry. That is incorrect. 800 Chosera on the Paraxis and a 2000 grit Koromaku on the Elementum. Sorry. 5 passes per side on 1 micron diamond on leather, and that's the edges. Now, I'm not going to test the Nitro V because it's quite thin behind the edge, and that will give it a slight advantage in my test, even though I'm trying to take geometry out of the behind the edge thickness geometry out of it. By using catches in the edge to show when the test is going to be called. So it's thin enough that I'm gonna leave it. I'll get another Nitro V edge to test, or another Nitro V from Civivi to test. But point is, 14C is what everybody sits there and says is the greatest budget steel ever, and I just don't understand why. I mean, yes, it is a good budget steel, don't get me wrong, but the edge retention of that stuff is not very good. It's not bad, but it's certainly not good. And Nitro V, same thing for Nitro V. The only place where these would really do great is if they was running super thin geometry, to where the toughness would actually benefit you. But they're not. Most of these knives are at typical EDC knife geometry, or behind the edge thickness, and it just doesn't have that good of edge retention when you look at it that way. I fully expect from the time I've put in with Civivi's 9CR that it should outcut that 14C by a lot. In day-to-day use, this knife right here holds up. The edge holds up far better than this knife. Now, I would say that the 14C strops back a little bit better. Not much, a little bit. You probably can bring it back from being a little bit more blunted, a little bit duller than you could the 9CR on a strop. I will give it that. I believe personally that the 9CR sharpens nicer. The 14C does take a slightly more sticky edge. The 9CR holds on to its bite a little better. But above everything, if you're just talking straight edge retention, if this knife in 14C, it's dead by the end of the day. If this knife is in my pocket and I use it all day for all my needs, this edge it's pretty much dull by the end of the day. And that's just not the case with the 14C. The 9CR. The 9CR definitely holds up longer for the way I'm using the knife. And that's cutting a whole lot of cardboard, cutting feed bags, cutting strapping, hard plastic strapping material, and God only knows what else I'm cutting during the day, but cardboard and feed bags. And when I'm talking feed bags, you're driving that cutting edge into the what's inside of the bag as well. And some of that stuff is rather abrasive, and will knock an edge down pretty damn quick. But the 9CR just takes it better. It holds up better. This edge won't get me through a full day, not without needing, to be stropped or touched up on a ceramic rod, but this edge will. And usually when the day's over and it's time to, touch up the edges, this edge will be in far, far, far better shape than this edge would. And I'm not just talking about Civivi. That goes for others as well. I have a 14C from anybody. It's just never performed very good for me. It's not bad, but it's certainly not good. And Nitro V, now I like Nitro V better, just for the fact that stuff will come back like crazy on a ceramic rod and come back so super sticky, and you don't even need to touch that stuff to a strop. When the edge falls off, a couple swipes on a ceramic rod and it's back popping hair. That's why I like Nitro V so much. And if I had to consider what's the best budget steel, it would, besides for 154 cm, I will take that every time. 154 and D2, but out of the other steels, besides for 154 or D2, if you said what's the best budget steel, I'm going to probably say Nitro V or OS 10. I really, really like those steels, and they perform great for me. The Nitro V really does a good job, just because, like I said, a few swipes on a ceramic rod and it's back popping hair. It's great stuff. But this 9CR, in my opinion, because the real point was not really this one. This was the point of the video mainly. And it was, why does everybody, Dicky ride 14C, and they shit on all the CR steels? I just don't understand it, when in a lot of cases those CR steels outperform the 14C in the metrics that we care about in pocket knives. To me, it just seems like how do I put it? They hear what somebody else says, they look up to that person, and now that person says that's their favorite steel too. And then that just keeps repeating itself until everybody under the sun says that's their favorite budget steel, and it's automatic. You don't even need to ask somebody what their favorite budget steel is. It's going to be 14C, because that's what everybody says. But my question is, why? And when you ask them that, first thing they'll say is, oh, because of how tough it is. Well, I don't know about you, but hell, Maximet is tough enough for me in a pocket knife, because I'm not using the knife in a way to where I need more toughness than that. That's their first statement. Then their second statement will be, oh, because it's super corrosion resistant. And it is. But 9CR is plenty corrosion resistant. I've never had a problem with it. And I could be out there, working in the I don't want to say this because it sounds kind of bad, but in the pig pen and the slop, where it's highly acidic, and guess what? 9CR don't rust. It doesn't corrode, because I wash it off and that's it. And that's in a highly acidic environment. And then one more thing you'll hear them say, oh, it's so fine grained, it takes such a great edge. Yes, it is very fine grained. Yes, it takes a great polished edge. Gets super sticky. Guess what? 9CR takes a fantastic edge too. Like, and then, when we talk about, well, 14C doesn't have that great edge retention, they'll fight you tooth and nail on that and say, oh yeah, it does it. It outperforms D2. Oh no, it doesn't. The edge retention is not good at all, in my opinion. That 9CR, and I'm not talking about in a cardboard cut test in this case. I'm talking about in just use. That 9CR vastly has longer edge retention than 14C does. And that D2, even not very well done D2, absolutely kills it. And 14C gets slick very, very quickly. You do a day of work with that knife, and that edge has absolutely no bite left to it. That's not the case with that 9CR right there. That's not the case with even just half-ass done D2. So my question is, why do people love... Now, we're not talking about fixed blade, belt knives, camp knives, harder use knives. We're not talking about that. We're talking about 3 to 4 inch folding knives. Why do people love 14C so much? Why? What about it? What about it do they love so much when the metrics that really matter, it's not that good in? And there's definitely better budget steels at a lower price that have vastly higher performance in the metrics that I care about and that I would assume most care about. But yet they'll continually say, oh, it's 9CR, oh, it's a okay steel. Oh, 14C, great steel. Awesome, love it. Best budget steel there is. How and why? The only thing that tells me is that the people that are saying it don't use their knives. They just read and listen and they repeat. And yeah, it's got to be that, because if they use their knives and they had some nines, for example, that Paraxis and that Elementum, and they go out and they use them and they really use it big time, they're going to come to the same conclusion that I do, that hey, that 9CR's edge retention is significantly better. And oh, the toughness, well, 14C's tougher. Yeah, but that edge is perfect. I didn't break that knife. I don't need that extra toughness. I need that extra edge retention. I don't know. Put your thoughts on it in the comments. I'm really curious as to why the community is so high strung on 14C 28N when it is very much a compromise steel. It compromises edge retention terribly in order to be very tough and very stainless. As where the 9CR, it's stainless enough, it's tough enough, and the edge retention is great. You're not compromising as badly with 9CR as you are 14C. If I had to say out of Nitro V and 14C, I would say 14C is also the more compromising steel, because from what I've seen, especially in custom heat treat Nitro V, the edge retention is really good up at around 64. The toughness is plenty for, smaller knives. I've never had it on a larger knife, just 3.5 inch fixed blades, and it's way stainless. So I just, and in production knives, the Nitro V will cut with it with 14C. And the edge retention is very close between the two. I think Nitro V holds on to its bite a little better, a little longer. And they're both, of course, tough, and they're both, of course, highly stainless. in outright edge retention, there's not a lot of difference, but the Nitro B holds its bite more. And I don't know about you, but I don't like a knife to slip. I want my edges to cut, not slip. And that bite's important. So, yeah, I don't know. I know this is a long ramble, but I'm shocked and I'm curious as to why people love it so much and shit on so many other steels when, from what I see in use, those other steels outperform it in the things I care about. I don't know. Comments, please. Give me some insight. Alright, guys.